So what I've put together, thinking about that, is a sort of strange mixture of images of works by a range of artists for whom making murals is an element of their practice, but they didn't necessarily set out as mural painters. And I think that's quite an interesting contrast with a range of artists who have set out in that way. And we haven't really talked so far about what makes a mural, the distinguishing characteristics of a mural, whether that be in a sort of conventional way, that the architectural elements of a given space are harmoniously incorporated into the picture. So when I was asked to come and speak, I did kind of look at what the conventional, traditional aspects of mural making are, and so that seems to sum up what a mural is supposed to be, and the things that there seem to be three core incentives behind making a mural, one of them being political, another being social, and then of course artistic. So I'm going to focus on the work of 4 artists who come to making murals in various different kinds of spaces as an integral element of their practice. And then I'm also going to show you some images of work by other artists who I felt needed to be brought into the discussion at this point. And I'm not necessarily going to talk about commissioning art in the public realm, except I think that will come in passing with some of the artists that I'm going to talk about I have worked with, and talking about how their work is, how their practice includes mural making means that I really want to have a look at their practice as a whole as well, of course. But I also, it's been an interesting just sort of set of conversations and talks so far that haven't taken us into the postmodern world, a world where artists are working in the 21st century, considering lots of different kind of aspects, and where artists take and reflect on life itself, taking every aspect of life as fair game as a material. I mean, that's something that's been happening ever since Dillon started making ready-mades, and probably before that. But moving on to topics like relational aesthetics and all the kind of complex issues that artists are dealing with now. But before I moved on to talking about a set of artists, or 2 groups of artists that I think do set out to make murals specifically, I was fascinated. I thought this image kind of summed up a lot of what I might want to talk about in the way that artists incorporate the idea of architectural space, mural making, and other kinds of aspects in their work. And this is an image of a work by Pablo Bronstein, who I'm sure many of you may have seen quite recently with his show at Nottingham Contemporary, and also at Chatsworth House. And he is fascinated by architectural space and the different kind of periods of architecture, and he's constantly making these kind of references across Palladian to Gothic to modern architecture, and figuring out what it is that architects are thinking about and doing. But this work was presented as a sort of backdrop to a series of performances with ballet dancers. So I just kind of felt that was an interesting starting point for thinking about these range of artists. And I wanted to just quickly touch on the work of the Bogside artists in Derry, London Derry, because you could say or think that they are, in a very conventional sense, mural painters, and they are artists who set out to be mural painters. They are a group of 3 artists: Tom Kelly, Kevin Masson, and William Kelly, who've made, I think we're all familiar with the murals that have been painted all over Northern Ireland, particularly since the Troubles began in the 60s. And these artists in particular have made these incredible murals, which I felt I wanted to just show because I've seen them myself in person, and they do have quite a dramatic effect. And they are political, they are commemorative, they talk about the people who were involved in a very specific struggle, and they're put in, they've been painted by popular demand from the local community to commemorate those people. And they really are quite extraordinary. They use conventionally mural kind of spaces, the kind of gable ends of houses, and then I guess they can be seen as slightly provocative, and maybe that's another purpose behind murals. But also they're about telling stories and making sure that those people are noted and remembered. And the second set of artists that I just wanted to mention are the who've really become quite more well known in the last, say, 10, 15 years, are street artists who've kind of built their practice up from potentially being graffiti artists or even sign painters or scenic painters, perhaps. And these images were painted as part of an exhibition that was put together specifically thinking about street art and the way that it's grown in popularity at Tate Modern in 2008, featuring a range of internationally important street artists, one of them being someone that I hope many of you may have heard of, called J.R., who comes from Brazil, and who works, as he says, in the streets, and he owns the biggest gallery in the world by working in that way. And they're highly impactful, these works, and they focus on people that live in the places that he's working with. And this is a favela in Brazil, one of his earlier large-scale works. And this is quite an extraordinary piece. I think it's amazing when you see it projected this large. Another artist that featured in the Tate Gallery show is an artist called Blue, B-L-U, who's based in Italy, and who sets up his or says of his practice that he sees the large kind of walls that he produces his work on simply as sheets of paper, and his work is very line-based, very drawing-based, and he creates these kind of oversized monsters that, in spite of the scale of the work, almost look as if the building itself is too small to hold them. Another less political, perhaps, set of our artists' works that have been popping up around London, Bow and Irony. This is a snapshot I took myself, and I couldn't believe when I suddenly came across this in East London by those artists. And I think they really do polarise opinion, these kinds of works. But they're certainly very popular in terms of the artists. They're technically very skilled and proficient. And I think it was interesting that the Tate made that exhibition because of how important this kind of work was seen to be becoming. So I'm going to move on to talk about 4 artists, but starting, this isn't one of them, but it demonstrates the use of this space, which I used to be responsible for when I was head of art in the Underground, and commissioned a number of works on the redundant platform, which these arches that you see comprise some of those part of that, the space there. And this is an amazing work by a Brazilian artist called Beatriz Milhares, which actually extends the whole length of the platform, and you can see how she literally took the architectural space and treated it as a place for a mural, and kind of changed her own artistic practice in order to do that. But the way that she achieved that was by thinking architecturally, thinking slightly differently for herself. And in the same space, I commissioned Chiho Aoshima, a Japanese artist, who makes these amazing, fantastical landscapes and works more frequently outside of the gallery space and in architectural space. And there's sort of a combination, this style of work, even though it looks very modern and contemporary, is influenced by Hokusai, and is kind of known as the phenomenon of superflat, for kind of obvious reasons. This kind of style of flat painting, and this kind of cutesy look, but at the same time there's a huge combination of cute and menacing, and this work proved very popular in that space. But that's as an introduction to the work of Sarah Morris, who is a quite well established now mid-career, quite well known artist based in New York, although she was born in this country, who's very influenced and interested in geometrical abstraction as part of her practice. And we invited her to make a work in the 19 spaces that you see here at Gloucester Road Station, where she took an existing piece actually that was that she created specially for the 2012 Olympics, and it's based on the idea of Big Ben, and so you sort of can get that sense. And she just devised this 19 different colourway process where you're as you come in on a train, it would almost seem like a flicker film as you were going at speed past it, but at the same time the level of detail meant that there was lots to look at as you're waiting for trains. Sarah Morris is actually an artist I wanted to say a bit more about because of the way that she has worked at a great scale over her practice and has managed to design and develop a huge number of works that either are temporary or permanent murals in a number of spaces in this country, in the States and in Europe. And as you can see, they're not unlike the kind of way that she uses geometric abstraction, not unlike some of the works that we've been looking at by Lotar earlier on today. But I'd say that what she's interested in is the actual kind of space of the city. And this work called Hornet in Dusseldorf is actually hand-painted high-gloss tiles, and the sort of flatness constantly seems to kind of jump between flat, plane, and 3 dimensions somehow. Here it is again. You can see it a little bit better. But what she's trying to do in these paintings is create this kind of virtual architecture, and she's referencing, as I said, a whole range of different practices from architects, a whole range of architects, from people like Oscar Niemeyer from Brazil, but through to airports, the different kind of aspects of life and what is embedded in the city. Airports, crowd control, the Olympics, advertising, and so on. The other kind of aspect of her work, other than the painting on canvas that is also an integral element to her work, is creating films. So she sees the making of films, whether they be sort of super lush, very high value production films. she sees them as kind of the other side of the same coin as her architectural paintings, because they're about huge cityscapes, they're about the people that create them. She wants people to see those works in the same kind of vein, if you like. This piece, Robert Towne, was a temporary installation. I think it might have been made permanent, but it was commissioned by the Public Art Fund in New York, and it's on the Lever House in New York, and it's extended from a series of paintings that she made called the Los Angeles series, and it's painted directly onto the ceiling by up to 10 scenic painters. And that's the other thing, when she designs these works, she always works in collaboration with other people to actually create them. There isn't her own physical hand in the work. The work is named after Robert Towne, who's a Hollywood writer, a director, and a film producer who's associated with lots of very well-known screenplays, things like Shampoo, Chinatown, Bonnie and Clyde, and so on. So she's making these kind of connections between geometric abstraction and super dense colour, and the sort of fast life of the city and the filmmakers that work therein, I suppose. And this is another. Lost my notes to tell me where this is. I apologise for that, but I think it's a permanent commission that was made in Germany. And the next artist I wanted to talk about is Jeremy Deller, who I feel has a very different reason for incorporating. And I realise I'm going to completely run out of time, actually, so I'm going to try and speed this up somewhat. But Jeremy Deller is very important as an artist, I think, for incorporating mural painting, but working in collaboration again with mural painters as part of his practice. He's an artist for whom collaboration and traditional modes of making art and working with wide and large groups of people is very important. And I worked with him at Art in the Underground on a project that was quite phenomenal called What's the City But the People? And it was a reaction to all the announcements that were constantly being made on the Underground to tell you what to do, give you information. And we asked Jeremy what he'd like to do, and he said, I'd like to have a day without any announcements at all, please. And of course that wasn't possible, so instead of doing that, he kind of did the reverse, which was to produce a whole booklet of phrases and sayings by some famous and not so famous people that train drivers across the whole of the Piccadilly line could use within their announcements to the people using the tube. So we had a huge job on our hands to persuade those train drivers and the people that run the stations to actually think that there was value in doing this. And we did manage to get those people on board. And we promoted the project through posters all over the Underground. In a way, these kinds of works could be seen as temporary murals, if you like, certainly designed carefully by designers that Jeremy chose specifically to create works that looked like they belonged in the Underground, using the Underground font and so on. But as a completely different aspect of his work, this image was taken when he was chosen to represent the UK in the Venice Pavilion, in the British Pavilion in Venice. And there were a number of murals as part of this actual exhibition, which was called English Magic. And obviously I think the words English Magic, he had his tongue potentially firmly in his cheek, because the whole exhibition references different kinds of aspects of English culture that Jeremy was kind of referencing, I suppose. And this particular mural which was made in collaboration with a mural painter called Stuart Sam Hughes, and who he has worked with many times. So actually kind of working with artists whose skills and experience that he feels he needs to complete the work. But this work, which is called A Good Day for Cyclists, also references, this is a hen harrier, which is a natural predator of a grouse, which have been given protected species, which are protected species in the UK after being hunted to near extinction. But two of them were shot over Sandringham Estate in 2007, when only Prince Harry and his friend William Van Outzen were known to have been there. And so he was making a point about this, and also the way the hen harrier is lifting up the Range Rover, which was why he called it A Good Day for Cyclists, because Range Rovers are seen as the kind of Chelsea tractor, being a big danger for cyclists in London. And then just to mention this other mural, which we've already been thinking about William Morris today, and this is William Morris picking up the incredibly enormous yacht that owned by the Russian oligarch. Someone can tell me his name. I've completely Abramovich, and which had been parked during the opening of the Venice Pavilion in a way to kind of obscure the view for many people, and Jeremy's incredibly interested in the everything about William Morris, and he brought him together recently in an exhibition about his practice alongside Andy Warhol, and he, I suppose what he's saying in this work, alongside many other things, is how he needed the mural painter to help him create this piece that he just kind of commissioned him, sort of subcontracted him to work on. And much of Jeremy's practice kind of takes us in that direction. So I think I'm going to. This was also part of the exhibition in Venice, which is actually a crushed Range Rover, and the film that you can see there on the left-hand side shows the Range Rover going into the crushing machine and being crushed. So another good day for English cyclists. This is another very different mural that Jeremy was commissioned to make as part of the Gwangju Biennial, and again, many references in this work as a reminder of a Korean filmmaker, Joon-ho, the sea monster from Host, and it's seen as a kind of metaphor for the kind of natural world coming to get us, I guess. I'm just going to race through now rather than talk in detail, because I've completely overrun on my time, and show you some works by the other artists that I wanted to pick out in this talk. This is the Palais Royal in Paris by the artist that we've also already heard a little bit about earlier on, Daniel Birem, and the way that he takes over public space with his signature black and white or other kind of colour and white stripes has been a kind of political gesture of his ever since he started making work in the 60s. But you can see also that he's very interested in taking over architectural space, or having an impact on architectural space. And he's made works all over the world, in some private and some public places, where he's kind of taken this political gesture and extended and expanded it. And I was very delighted to see that his new murals at Tottenham Court Road Station have finally started to be unveiled. We started work on commissioning these in 2007, and they're finally there for all to see. And they sit in conversation, if you like, with these perhaps more well-known murals at this point by Eduardo Paolozzi. And obviously there's been some controversy about what should happen with those murals. They had to develop the ticket hall where a lot of the Paolozzi tiled murals sit, but they will be reconstructed and housed in a museum. I'm not quite sure which one it is. It's not the Transport Museum, but they are safe and they are being reconstructed wherever possible on the platform level as well. This is an artist called Naveen Datta, who's very interested in the sort of collision between the West and East philosophies and technologies, and she makes a point of making her murals in various spaces. This is a work that she's making in Athens called Imagine a Palm Tree, which has been funded by crowdfunding, allowing her to spend 6 months painting this work. As you can see, it's kind of based on an Islamic kind of patterning, but at the same time she incorporates things like the blue symbols there, which are Wi-Fi symbols, and then the kind of camera symbols above that. So she's a very young artist at a very different stage of her career, and for her, even though artists like Sol LeWitt are important to her because of the notion of performance as part of the production of a mural, she feels it's important to make every single brushstroke herself in the creation of her murals. And here she is actually at work in Athens. And you can see this work until Sunday, I believe, which was part of the Royal College of Art show. This is a work based on the idea of Morse Code called "I'm sorry you missed me." I'm sorry you missed me. I'm sorry I missed you. And the kind of it's about the kind of miscommunication that happens through coded messaging. This is a work by Kemang Luher, and who works on these huge, large-scale chalk drawings on blackboard. And the point he's making here is, other than whatever is contained within the image itself, is that they can be erased very easily in spite of the hard work and detail that's gone into them. Similarly with these, by an artist called Barbara Walker, who's interested in portraits, particularly of the black community that she lives in Birmingham, and referencing the way that the members of that community go unrecognised for the work that they do and have done over centuries. And again, she works on a very large scale with these quirky portraits that can easily be erased again. This is Gary Simmons, who works similarly with chalk on blackboard. Kira Phillips was an artist I wanted to just show an image of because of the way she works in architectural space with printmaking. Michael Lin, I haven't got time to say more about his work, but he's a Taiwanese artist who makes these incredibly large-scale commissions based on the kind of Taiwanese bed prints. Bridget Riley, thought you'd want to see this piece, the largest piece she's made in many, many years, and was persuaded to actually make this incredible mural in this hospital in London. And the Sol LeWitt, which is in a public space in the States, was created in the 80s and then recreated in 2013. Sol LeWitt, of course, very interested in architectural and wall-based drawings, but giving the actual performance of making the work as a set of instructions to other people. Another Sol LeWitt, Carlos Cruz Diaz, Venezuelan artist in a Venezuelan airport. Jacqueline Poncelet, a commission in vitreous enamel that was made by Art on the Underground, and you can see this in Edgware in West London. Ian Davenport, Michael Craig Martin. And then I just wanted to finish with thinking about new technology, and this work by Jaume Plenza in Millennium Square in Chicago, which is a constantly changing wall. And I think we now have a different concept of architecture because of the nature of new technology, and that was something that artists are really thinking about and playing with now. So sorry I've run over by about 10 minutes.
Not at all.